Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the exploration ship U.S. Horizon, watching the stars through the main viewing screen. His crew had been out here for 3 months, mapping new star systems at the edge of human space. It was quiet, work, but Jake knew it was important. Every new world they found could become humanity's next home. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange," said Lisa Park from her position at the navigation station. She was young but sharp, one of the best navigators in the fleet. Her fingers moved quickly over the control panel as she tried to make sense of what her sensors were showing her. Jake walked over to look at her screen. "What kind of strange?" "There's an energy reading coming from that moon." Lisa pointed to a small gray rock orbiting a gas giant. "It's not natural. The pattern is too regular, too organized." Danny Rodriguez looked up from his engineering station. He was a big man with steady hands and 20 years of experience keeping ships running in deep space. Could be an old probe or satellite. Sometimes we lose track of the early exploration equipment. Amy Carter, their communications officer, shook her head. "I've checked all the records. We never sent anything to this system. No human ship has ever been this far out before." Jake studied the readings. The energy signature was unlike anything. In their databases, it pulsed in a steady rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. "How long has it been active?" "That's the weird part," Lisa said. "According to these readings, it's been going for a very long time. Maybe centuries." The bridge fell quiet. Everyone knew what that might mean. Humans had been exploring space for over 200 years, but they had never found any sign of other intelligent life. Scientists debated whether humanity was alone in the universe, but so far all they had found were empty worlds and dead rocks. "Take us in for a closer look," Jake ordered. "But keep the shields up and weapons ready." The horizon moved slowly toward the small moon. As they got closer, their sensors revealed more details. The energy source was coming from inside a structure, built into the moon's surface. The building was clearly artificial, made from materials that their computers couldn't identify. Captain Amy's voice was tense. "I'm picking up some kind of transmission from that structure. It's very faint, but it's definitely there. Can you decode it?" "I'm trying, but it's unlike anything I've ever seen. The pattern is completely foreign." Jake made his decision. "Prepare a landing shuttle. Lisa, Danny, you're with me. Amy, stay here and keep monitoring that signal. If anything goes wrong, get word back to Earth immediately." The 3 officers suited up and took a small shuttle down to the moon's surface. The structure was larger than it had appeared from orbit, stretching deep into the rock. An entrance had opened as they approached, as if the building was welcoming them inside. "This is definitely not human technology," Danny said as they walked through corridors lit by soft blue lights. The walls were smooth and curved, made from a material that seemed to absorb sound. They found what they were looking for in a large chamber at the center of the structure. In the middle of the room stood a tall cylinder filled with glowing liquid. Inside the cylinder floated a being unlike anything they had ever imagined. The creature was tall and thin, with pale skin that seemed to shimmer in the light. Its limbs were longer than human proportions, and its face was angular with large, dark eyes. It appeared to be sleeping or in some kind of suspended animation. "Is it alive?" Lisa whispered. Before anyone could answer, the liquid in the cylinder began to drain away. The being's eyes opened, and it looked directly at Jake. When it spoke, the words formed directly in their minds, bypassing their ears entirely. "Welcome, humans of Earth. I am the Herald of the Galactic Concordat. I have been waiting for you." Jake fought down his shock and tried to remain calm. "You know about Earth? You know about us? We have known about your species for many of your generations. We have watched you spread from your homeworld to other planets. We have observed your wars, your growth, your technology." The Herald stepped out of the cylinder, moving with fluid grace. Despite its alien appearance, there was something dignified about its presence. "I was sent here to deliver a message to your people, a message that will determine the future of your species." "What kind of message?" Jake asked. The Herald gestured, and images appeared in the air around them. They saw vast fleets of ships unlike any human design. cities on distant worlds inhabited by dozens of different alien species, and technology that seemed like magic compared to human science. The galaxy is not empty as you believe. It is filled with life, with civilizations far older than yours. They have formed an alliance called the Galactic Concordat, a union of over 3,000 species working together for peace and prosperity. Lisa stepped forward. If there are so many other species, why haven't we met any of them before? Because your species has been under observation. The Concordat debates the fate of every new species they encounter. Some are welcomed as members. Others are considered too dangerous and are contained or eliminated. Danny's voice was hard. Category do humans fall into? The Herald's expression became grave. That is what the Concordat is deciding now. Your species has shown remarkable technological advancement in a very short time. You have also shown tendencies toward aggression and territorial expansion. Members of the Concordat view you as a potential threat. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. What does that mean for us? I have been sent to deliver an ultimatum. Humanity must accept certain restrictions on your expansion into space. You must agree to Concordat oversight of your colonies and technology development. You must relocate your outer settlements to areas approved by the Concordat. In return, you will be granted junior membership status and protection under Concordat law. And if we refuse, Jake asked, though he already suspected the answer, then humanity will be classified as a rogue species. Your expansion will be stopped. By force, your colonies will be disbanded. Your people will be confined to your home system until you are no longer considered a threat. The three humans looked at each other. The weight of what they were hearing was almost impossible to comprehend. Everything they thought they knew about humanity's place in the universe was wrong. How long do we have to decide? Lisa asked. 50 of your Earth years? I will accompany you back to your homeworld to present this ultimatum to your leaders. Formally, they must have time to consider their response carefully. Jake nodded slowly. We'll take you back to Earth. But I have to ask, what do you personally think we should do? The Herald was quiet for a long moment. In my travels, I have seen many species face this choice. Those who accept Concordat guidance usually survive and prosper, though they must give up their independence. Those who refuse rarely survive the consequences, but some do survive, very few, and those that do are forever changed by the experience. They prepared to leave the ancient structure and return to the horizon. As they walked back through the curved corridors, Jake couldn't help but think about how this moment would change everything. Humanity was about to learn that they were not alone in the universe, that their future was not entirely in their own hands. The Herald followed them onto the shuttle, moving with careful precision. As they lifted off from the moon's surface, Jake looked back at the structure that had held such momentous secrets for so long. Captain Amy's voice crackled over the communication system. I'm picking up multiple ships approaching our position. They're not human designs. Jake's blood ran cold. Through the shuttle's windows, he could see sleek vessels moving toward the horizon with obvious hostile intent. The Herald's expression darkened as it recognized the ship configurations. Zenthari Empire vessels, the Herald said grimly. They are among those who believe humanity should be eliminated rather than offered membership. It must not be allowed to prevent this message from reaching your people. Jake pushed the shuttle's engines to maximum speed, racing to reach the horizon before the alien ships could intercept them. Behind them, the future of humanity hung in the balance, dependent on whether they could deliver the Herald's ultimatum. To Earth, the stakes had never been higher, and Jake knew that whatever happened next would determine whether his species had a future among the stars or would face extinction at the hands of powers they never knew existed. Jake pushed the shuttle harder than it was designed to go. The small craft shook as its engines strained to reach the horizon before the alien ships could intercept them. Through the cockpit window, he could see the sleek forms of the Zenthari vessels moving with deadly purpose toward his ship. How long until we reach the horizon? He asked Lisa, who was frantically working the navigation controls. 2 minutes at this speed, but I don't think we have that long. The Herald sat silently in the passenger section, its alien features tense. with what Jake could only guess was fear or anger. The Xanthari should not be here. This violates every law of the Concordat. I am under diplomatic protection. Tell them that, Danny said grimly as he monitored the shuttle's struggling engines. On the Horizon's bridge, Amy Carter watched the approaching alien ships with growing alarm. She had tried every communication frequency she knew, but the alien vessels refused to respond to her attempts at contact. Their intent was clear from their formation and speed. Captain Morrison, please respond, she called over the communication system. We have 6 unknown vessels approaching. They're not answering our signals. Jake's voice crackled back through the static. See them, Amy? Get the ship ready to jump to light speed the moment we're aboard. Send an emergency message to Earth now. Tell them everything we've learned. Amy's fingers flew over her controls as she began composing the most important message in human history. She included everything about the Herald, the Concordat, and the ultimatum. If something happened to them, Earth needed to know what they were facing. The shuttle reached the horizon just as the first alien ship opened fire. Bright beams of energy lanced through space, barely missing the small craft as Jake threw it into desperate evasive maneuvers. The Horizon's hangar bay doors opened, and Jake flew the shuttle inside without slowing down, trusting his crew to catch them with the emergency barriers. We're aboard, Jake announced over the ship's communication system. Get us out of here. Now, the Horizon's engines came to life, but the alien ships were already in position. Commander Kyle Bennett of the Xanthari fleet had been waiting for this moment. He believed that allowing humans to carry the Herald's message back to Earth would be a mistake that the Concordat would regret for generations. Target their engines, Bennett ordered his weapons officer. Disable them, but keep the ship intact. I want to question the survivors. Xanthari weapons were far more advanced than anything humans had developed. The first volley struck the Horizon's rear section, sending massive power surges through the ship's systems. Emergency lights flickered on as the main power grid failed. Danny Rodriguez was already running toward the engine room when the attack hit. The explosion threw him against a bulkhead, but he got back up and kept moving. The ship's engines were his responsibility, and he wasn't going to let his crewmates down. In the engine room, he found chaos. Control panels sparked and smoked, and warning alarms blared from every direction. The main engines were offline and the backup systems were failing fast. But Danny had spent 20 years learning every system on ships like this one. He knew there was one last option. On the bridge, Jake tried desperately to get his ship moving. The Xanthari vessels surrounded them now, their weapons charging for another attack. The Herald stood beside him, its expression grave. To kill us all, the Herald said. Bennett has decided that preventing my message from reaching Earth is worth violating every treaty the Concordat has signed. Can you contact them? Make them stop? I have tried. They are not listening. Amy looked up from her communication station. Captain, I've sent the message to Earth. Everything we learned is now on its way home. But the Xanthari are jamming our long-range communications. I can't send anything else. Another volley of alien fire struck the horizon. This time, the weapons targeted the ship's hull directly. The Xanthari were no longer trying to disable the human vessel. They intended to destroy it completely. In the engine room, Danny made a desperate decision. He began overriding safety protocols, feeding power directly from the ship's emergency batteries into the communication array. It would give them enough power for one final transmission, but it would also overload the entire electrical system. Captain, Danny's voice came over the internal communication system. I can give you 30 seconds of full power. Use it to send another message to Earth. After that, we're done. Jake understood. Danny was sacrificing himself to give them one last chance to warn Earth. Do it, Danny, and thank you. The Horizon's communication array blazed to life with more power than it had ever been designed to handle. Jake quickly recorded a final message telling Earth about the attack and the Xanthari threat. He included everything he could think of that might help his people prepare for what was coming in the engine room. Danny watched the power levels climb past every safety limit. Sparks flew from overloaded circuits and the smell of burning electronics filled the air. He knew he had maybe 20 seconds before the entire system exploded. Taking him with it, He thought about his wife Maria back on Earth, and his two young children who would grow up without their father, but they would grow up free, and that was worth any sacrifice. The explosion in the engine room sent a shockwave through the entire ship. Danny Rodriguez died instantly, but his sacrifice gave Jake those precious 30 seconds to send his warning to Earth. The Herald activated an emergency beacon that had been built into its body by the Concordat. The beacon sent out a signal across all known communication frequencies, formally declaring that a diplomatic mission had been attacked and that the Zenthari had committed war crimes under Concordat law. This will cause political chaos in the Concordat, the Herald told Jake, as the Zenthari ships moved in for the final attack. Bennett has just started a war he cannot win. Commander Bennett watched the human ship's death throes with satisfaction. The Horizon was dead in space, its crew trapped and helpless. But then his communication officer reported something that made his blood run cold. "Sir, the Herald's emergency beacon is broadcasting across all Concordat frequencies. Every species in the Alliance will know what we've done within hours." Bennett's face twisted with rage. He had hoped to eliminate the Herald quietly, making it appear that the humans had killed their own diplomatic contact. Now his attack was being broadcast across the galaxy, marking him as a war criminal. "Destroy that ship," he ordered. "Leave no survivors." Zenthari weapons fired one final time. The beams of energy tore through the Horizon's hull like paper, venting atmosphere and destroying critical systems. Jake Morrison died at his post on the bridge, still trying to save his ship and crew. Lisa Park died at her navigation station, and Amy Carter died trying to send one last message to Earth. The Herald, mortally wounded, but still conscious, used the last of its strength to enhance the emergency beacon's signal. As the ship broke apart around it, the Herald's final act was to ensure that its death, the unprovoked attack on a diplomatic mission, would be known throughout the galaxy. The Horizon exploded in a brilliant flash of light, taking with it for brave souls who had stumbled into humanity's first contact with alien life, but their sacrifice was not in vain. Their messages had reached Earth, carrying news that would change the course of human history. Light years away, on Earth, the emergency transmissions from the Horizon were being received by deep space monitoring stations. Within hours, the most powerful leaders on the planet would know that humanity was not alone in the universe, and that they faced a threat unlike anything they had ever imagined. The Herald was dead, killed while carrying out a peaceful diplomatic mission. The crew of the Horizon had died trying to bring vital information back to their people. But their deaths would not be forgotten, and they would not go unavenged. Commander Bennett had gotten what he wanted. The Herald's message would never be delivered in person to Earth's leaders. But in killing the Herald, he had also ensured that humanity would never trust the Concordat again. The Zenthari commander had just guaranteed that the species he feared most would respond to first contact not with negotiation and compromise, but with total war. President Helen Martinez stood at the podium in the United Nations Assembly Hall, looking out at the faces of world leaders who had been called to this emergency session. In her hands, she held the most important speech in human history. Hall was silent except for the quiet hum of recording equipment that would carry her words to every corner of Earth. "Fellow leaders of humanity," she began, her voice steady despite the weight of what she was about to reveal. 3 days ago, we received a transmission from the exploration vessel U.S. Horizon. What they discovered will change everything we thought we knew about our place in the universe. She paused, letting the gravity of her words sink in. We are not alone. The galaxy is filled with intelligent life, and they have been watching us for generations. A wave of shocked murmurs swept through the assembly.
Duh.
President Martinez raised her hand for silence and continued. The Horizon made contact with a being called the Herald, a representative of something called the Galactic Concordat. This Concordat is an alliance of over 3,000 alien species. They sent the Herald to deliver an ultimatum to humanity. She activated a holographic display that showed the images Jake Morrison had transmitted back to Earth. The assembly gasped as they saw alien ships, cities on distant worlds, and technology beyond human understanding. The Herald's message was simple. President Martinez continued. Submit to alien oversight, Or we can stand up and fight for our right to exist as free beings. The debate continued for hours, but gradually a consensus began to emerge. The more the delegates discussed the situation, the more they realized that humanity had never really been given a choice. The Concordat had been planning humanity's subjugation for decades, regardless of what the Herald's mission might have accomplished. Admiral Thompson presented his analysis of the military situation. We are outnumbered and outgunned, but we have something they don't expect. We have nothing to lose. A cornered animal is the most dangerous kind. The vote, when it finally came, was overwhelming. Every major nation on Earth agreed to the same course of action. They would not submit to alien oversight. They would not abandon their colonies, would not accept subjugation. President Martinez returned to the podium for the final time that day. The weight of history pressed down on her shoulders as she prepared to speak the words that would change everything. By unanimous decision of the United Nations Emergency Assembly, representing all nations and peoples of Earth, we reject the Concordat's ultimatum. We will not submit to alien oversight. We will not accept limits on human expansion. We will not relocate our colonies to satisfy alien demands. She paused, letting the words sink in before continuing. Furthermore, the unprovoked attack on the U.S. horizon and the murder of the Herald constitute acts of war against humanity. The Galactic Concordat has shown that they consider us enemies, regardless of our response to their ultimatum. Therefore, we have no choice but to respond in kind. The Assembly held its breath as President Martinez spoke the words that would echo through history. Effective immediately, humanity declares total war against the Galactic Concordat. We will defend our colonies, protect our people, and fight for our right to exist as free beings in this galaxy. We did not choose this war, but we will finish it. The hall erupted in a mixture of fear and determination. Some delegates wept, understanding the terrible cost that lay ahead. Others stood and applauded, ready to fight for humanity's freedom. Within hours, emergency broadcasts were sent to every human colony and settlement. Project Prometheus, the secret weapons development program, was revealed to the public. Military reserves were activated, and civilian populations began preparing for war. The die was cast. Humanity would not go quietly into subjugation, would fight, and they would make the Concordat pay dearly for every human life taken. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you cornered the most dangerous species it had ever produced. Earth transformed into something no human generation had ever seen before. Within weeks of President Martinez's declaration of war, every major city buzzed with activity as factories retooled to produce weapons and ships. The planet that had once been home to farmers, teachers, and shopkeepers was now a fortress world preparing for the fight of its life. Admiral Seb Thompson stood in the command center of the newly constructed orbital defense station Unity 1, watching streams of data flow across dozens of screens. Ships were being built faster than anyone had thought possible. The civilian shipyards that once produced cargo vessels and passenger liners now worked around the clock building destroyers and fighters. "How many ships do we have ready for combat?" he asked Colonel Gary Phillips, who had been put in charge of fleet construction. 43 destroyers, 16 cruisers, and over 200 fighters, Phillips replied. "Not nearly enough if the intelligence reports about Concordat fleet sizes are accurate, but it's what we have." Dr. Susan Blake walked into the command center, carrying a tablet filled with technical specifications. Her team had been working without sleep for 3 weeks, developing new weapons based on the limited data they had gathered from alien technology fragments found at old observation posts. "The quantum disruption torpedoes are ready for testing," she announced. "If our calculations are correct, they should be able to penetrate Concordat energy shields. Their ships rely on technology we don't understand, but energy is energy. Disrupt it enough, and their defenses will fail." Thompson nodded grimly. "What about the communication jammers?" "Those are already being installed on our ships. The Concordat relies heavily on coordinated fleet tactics. If we can blind their sensor networks and disrupt their communications, we can force them to fight as individual ships rather than as a unified fleet. The first test of humanity's new military doctrine would come sooner than anyone expected. Long-range sensors detected a Concordat fleet approaching the Alpha Centauri system, where over 50,000 human colonists lived and worked on 3 different worlds. Colony. Administrator Frank Turner received the warning with grim determination. He had been a farmer before taking the job of running the agricultural settlements on Alpha Centauri. 3. Now he found himself responsible for organizing the evacuation of civilians and the defense of humanities. Oldest colony outside the solar system. How long do we have? He asked Defense Coordinator Betty Morgan, a former military officer who had retired to the colonies, seeking a peaceful life. 6 days until they reach the outer system, maybe 8 days until they're in attack position, Morgan replied, while studying tactical displays. We can get most of the civilians to the underground shelters, but we can't evacuate everyone. Turner made the hardest decision of his life. Then we fight. These people came here to build new lives for their families. We're not going to abandon their homes without a fight. The human defense fleet arrived at Alpha Centauri just 2 days ahead of the Concordat force. Captain Tim Wells commanded the destroyer U.S. Defiance, the lead ship in a small squadron of 12 vessels. His orders were simple: delay the enemy advance and protect the colony at all costs. Captain, we're getting our first look at their fleet, reported his tactical officer. 27 ships, all larger than anything in our fleet. Their technology readings are off the charts. Wells studied the enemy formation through his ship's sensors. The Xanthari vessels moved in perfect coordination, their hulls gleaming with energy shields that made them nearly invulnerable to conventional weapons. By every measure of military science, the human fleet was hopelessly outmatched. Signal the fleet, Wells ordered. Aye. Remember, we're not trying to win a traditional space battle. We're trying to survive long enough to make them pay for every inch of space they take. The Xanthari commander, expecting an easy victory over primitive human forces, was surprised when the human ships scattered in all directions instead of forming a battle line. Rather than engaging in ship-to-ship combat, humans began using the asteroid field around Alpha Centauri as cover, darting between rocks and using hit-and-run tactics. Captain, Wells led the Defiance on a dangerous course through the densest part of the asteroid field, using the ship's smaller size and greater maneuverability to stay ahead of the pursuing aliens. When Xanthari ships followed him into the rocks, he activated the new quantum disruption torpedoes. The torpedoes struck the lead Xanthari vessel just as it was navigating between 2 large asteroids. The quantum disruption caused the ship's energy shields to collapse in a cascade failure, leaving it vulnerable to a direct hit from conventional missiles. The alien ship exploded in a brilliant flash, its debris adding to the asteroid field. First blood to humanity, Wells announced over the fleet communication channel. Now let's make them earn every system. The battle raged for 6 hours. Human ships used every unconventional tactic they could think of. They rammed damaged vessels into enemy ships, used mining charges to create debris fields, and even deliberately triggered solar flares to disrupt Concordat sensors. Commander Linda Murphy, Piloting, the fighter UES Stinger, led a squadron of 20 small craft in a desperate attack on the Xanthari flagship. Her fighters were too small to carry the heavy weapons needed to damage capital ships, but they carried something else that proved equally effective: nuclear mines. Remember, we only get one chance at this, Murphy told her pilots as they approached the massive alien vessel. Get in close, plant the mines, and get out. If we can take out their command ship, the rest of their fleet will be in chaos. The fighters dove toward the Xanthari flagship like angry wasps, weaving between defensive fire from the ship's weapons. Half of Murphy's squadron was destroyed in the first 30 seconds, but the survivors pressed on. They planted their nuclear mines along the ship's hull and escaped just as the weapons detonated. The Xanthari flagship didn't explode, but the nuclear blasts damaged its shields and weapon systems. For the first time in the battle, a Concordat vessel was forced to withdraw from combat. Despite their successes, the human fleet was taking terrible losses. Of the 12 ships that had started the battle, only 4 remained operational. Captain Wells knew they couldn't hold out much longer. All ships, "This is Wells," he broadcast. "We've bought the colony as much time as we can. It's time for the final play." The 4 surviving human ships formed up in a tight formation and charged directly at the center of the Xanthari fleet. It was a suicide run, but it was also the most effective tactic they had left. Rather than trying to outfight superior technology, they would use their most reliable weapon, human determination. The Defiance led the charge, its hull scarred and its shields failing. Wells aimed his ship directly at the largest Xanthari vessel and pushed his engines beyond their design limits. Behind him, the other human captains followed his example. The collision, when it came, shook both fleets. The Defiance struck the Xanthari vessel with enough force to breach both ships' hulls. Captain Wells died at the moment of impact, but his sacrifice took out one of the enemy's most powerful ships. The other human vessels followed his example, ramming into Concordat ships and causing massive damage. By the time the battle ended, the Xanthari fleet had lost 8 ships and was forced to retreat. The human colony was saved, but at a terrible cost. News of the victory at Alpha Centauri spread throughout human space and beyond. For the first time, a Concordat fleet had been defeated by a supposedly primitive species. The victory proved that human determination and unconventional tactics could overcome technological superiority. More importantly, the battle sent a message throughout the galaxy. Humanity would not surrender. They would fight with everything they had, using any tactic necessary to protect their freedom. The Concordat had wanted to contain or eliminate the human threat, but instead they had created an enemy unlike any they had faced before. The war was just beginning, but humanity had proven they could fight back. The galaxy was about to learn. What happened when you tried to cage the most dangerous species it had ever produced? The war that had started with the death of one alien diplomat now consumed entire star systems. For 2 years, humanity and the Galactic Concordat had fought across dozens of worlds, and both sides bore terrible scars. But something unexpected was happening throughout the galaxy. The Concordat, once united in its mission to control humanity, was beginning to fracture. Commander Julie Barnes crouched in the ruins of what had once been a Concordat communication hub on the planet Kepler 7. Her strike team had fought for 6 days to capture this facility, and half of her soldiers were dead or wounded. But the intelligence they had gathered was worth every sacrifice. "Captain, you need to see this," said Sergeant Mike Collins, one of her communications specialists. He was hunched over a captured alien computer terminal, his face pale with shock. Julie looked at the data streaming across the screen. The communications logs showed heated arguments between different Concordat species. The Xanthari Empire was demanding more aggressive action against humanity, while other species were questioning whether the war was justified at all. "Look at this message." Collins pointed to a transmission from the Andrari Collective. One of the Concordat's founding members? They're formally protesting the Xanthari's actions. They say the Herald's murder violated every principle the Concordat was built on. Julie felt a spark of hope for the first time in months. What else does it say? 3 species have already withdrawn their fleets from the war. The Corvin Republic, the Elisi Federation, and the Moran Assembly have all declared neutrality. They're saying this isn't their fight anymore. Back on Earth, Dr. Susan Blake was putting the finishing touches on humanity's most desperate weapon. Her laboratory deep beneath the Rocky Mountains had become the center of a project so dangerous that even she sometimes wondered if they had gone too far. "The biological agents are ready for deployment," she told General Tony Clark, who had overall command of Earth's defense forces. "But I have to warn you again about the risks." Clark studied the test results on his tablet. The bioweapons were designed to exploit the fact that humans had evolved on what most alien species considered a death world. Earth's high gravity, dangerous atmosphere, and deadly microorganisms had forged humanity into one of the most physically resilient species in the galaxy. "Will it work?" Clark asked. "Against most Concordat species, yes. Their immune systems have never encountered anything like Earth bacteria. What would give a human a mild cold could kill a Xanthari in ours." Clark made the hardest decision of his military career. Deploy it. We're fighting for the survival of our species. We can't afford to be squeamish about our methods. The biological weapons were loaded onto unmanned drones and sent to Concordat military bases throughout human space. Within weeks, reports began arriving of alien forces falling ill with mysterious diseases. The Xanthari, who had prided themselves on their physical superiority, found themselves helpless against invisible enemies smaller than they could see. But the real turning point came when a massive Concordat fleet, led by the surviving Xanthari commanders, arrived at Earth itself. They had decided to end the war by destroying humanity's homeworld, regardless of the political cost within the Concordat. Admiral Rick Thompson stood on the bridge of the orbital fortress New Geneva, watching the enemy fleet approach through the outer solar system. Over 300 alien ships moved toward Earth in the largest military formation ever assembled by the Concordat. "Signal all units," Thompson ordered. "This is what we've been preparing for. Everything we've learned. Every weapon we've built, every tactic we've developed comes down to this moment." Admiral Patricia Moore, commanding the defense fleet from the battleship U.S. Retribution, knew they were facing impossible odds. The human fleet numbered less than 200 ships, and many of those were hastily converted civilian vessels crewed by volunteers. "All civilian ships. This is Admiral Moore," she broadcast across the fleet communication channel. "No one will think less of you if you withdraw now. This isn't your fight." Response surprised even her. Captain Eddie Lewis, commanding a converted mining ship called the Lucky Strike, spoke for hundreds of civilian captains when he replied, "With respect, Admiral, this is everyone's fight. These are our families down there, our children, our future. We're not going anywhere." The battle for Earth began in the asteroid belt, where human forces had spent months preparing defensive positions. The aliens expected to sweep aside the human defenses and proceed directly to Earth, but they found themselves facing something they had never encountered before, an entire species willing to fight to extinction rather than surrender. Human ships emerged from hiding places throughout the solar system. They came from behind asteroids, from the shadows of Jupiter's moons, and from locations no military strategist would ever consider hiding a fleet. The Concordat found themselves fighting not one coordinated defense, but hundreds of individual battles against enemies who refused to follow any conventional military doctrine. Captain Lewis led a squadron of converted civilian ships in a desperate attack on the Concordat flagship. His mining vessel wasn't built for combat, but it carried something more dangerous than any military weapon: a hold full of nuclear mining charges and a crew that had nothing left to lose. "Remember, we don't need to win," Lewis told his crew. As they approached the massive alien vessel, "We just need to make them pay such a high price that they'll never want to fight us again." The Lucky Strike rammed into the Concordat flagship's hull with enough force to breach both ships' armor. As the mining charges detonated, Captain Lewis and his crew died, knowing they had struck a blow that would be remembered for generations. Throughout the solar system, similar scenes played out as human forces threw everything they had at the invading fleet. The biological weapons they had deployed earlier began taking effect on alien crews, causing panic and confusion in the Concordat ranks. Admiral Thompson watched from New Geneva as the battle reached its climax. The Concordat fleet was larger and more powerful, but they were fighting an enemy that seemed to have no concept of surrender or retreat. Every time they destroyed a human ship, two more appeared to take its place. The turning point came when the surviving Xanthari commander, desperate to salvage something from the disaster, ordered his remaining ships to target Earth cities directly. It was a war crime under Concordat law. But the Xanthari were beyond caring about legal niceties. Admiral Moore, commanding the last functional human battleship, made the same decision that Captain Wells had made at Alpha Centauri and Captain Lewis had made hours earlier. She aimed the UES Retribution directly at the Xanthari command ship and engaged the engines at maximum power. "This is Admiral Moore to all surviving ships," she broadcast. "It has been an honor to serve with you. Take care of our people." The collision between the Retribution and the Xanthari flagship ended the battle. Both ships were destroyed instantly, but the psychological effect on the surviving Concordat forces was devastating. They had come to Earth expecting to fight a desperate but ultimately hopeless defense. Instead, they had faced an enemy that preferred mutual destruction to defeat. The surviving Concordat ships began withdrawing from the solar system. They had achieved nothing except massive casualties and the complete destruction of their reputation throughout the galaxy. News of the failed attack on Earth spread quickly, causing political upheaval that would destroy the Concordat as a unified force. President Martinez, speaking from a bunker beneath the ruins of Geneva, addressed the surviving human forces in the watching galaxy. "We did not choose this war, but we have finished it. The price of our freedom has been paid in the blood of heroes who will never be forgotten." Within months, delegations from moderate Concordat species began arriving at Earth, seeking to establish diplomatic relations with humanity on equal terms. The Xanthari Empire collapsed into civil war. The Galactic Concordat dissolved as its member species chose sides or declared independence. Humanity emerged from the war scarred but victorious. They had earned their place in the galaxy not through submission or negotiation, but through their willingness to pay any price for freedom. The Herald's death had not been in vain. It had revealed the true nature of those who claimed to bring peace, and it had forged humanity into something the galaxy had never seen before. A species that would rather die free than live as slaves. Stars belonged to humanity now, not because they had been granted permission to explore them, but because they had fought for the right to reach them. And in the ruins of the old order, something new was being born, a galaxy where freedom was. Not a gift to be granted by the powerful, but a right to be defended by the brave.